Good morning, bird nerds and twitchers, ringers, patch watchers, robin strokers, or anyone else who has stumbled across this channel. A very warm welcome to you all. In today's talk, we will be travelling to Ascension Island. Ascension is a British overseas territory. It's an extremely remote volcanic island in the equatorial waters of the South Atlantic. It sits sort of in between West Africa and Brazil, and near enough to the equator to afford it warm weather year round. In April of 2015, I travelled to Ascension with the Army Ornithological Society on an expedition to monitor the island's seabirds, and an effort that's been going on since about 1987. A part of our responsibilities was to re-trap ring sooty terns and recover geolocators that had been fitted to some of them the previous year. This was quite a mammoth task. It was took up most of the expedition itself, and but once we had felt that we had achieved those goals, we then continued to ring more sooty terns and fit more geolocators. What follows is an overview really of the 12 days that we spent there, highlighting some of the key areas where we focused our energies. The whole expedition itself was extremely memorable. It was ridiculous in some ways to be part of it, because it was so surreal. Not only because I was with a fantastic group of very knowledgeable ringers and ornithologists and birders who had been there before, so really knew the lay of the land and how to approach it, but also to be on an island so full of history, to handle some of these birds, is an extreme privilege, and to be in that landscape. It was quite alien really, this backdrop of volcanic terrain. So yeah, wonderful experience. So I hope that you enjoy the following talk and slideshow, and if you're enjoying the channel, please feel free to subscribe and hit the bell notification. There are more videos on their way, lots more content. Anyway, let's now just sit back and enjoy the return to Ascension. The historical timeline of Ascension is fascinating, from its discovery by the Portuguese in 1501 to the establishment of a garrison of British troops in 1815. And of course they were placed there to protect it from the French, because of course after Waterloo, Napoleon was then incarcerated on St Helena. Captain James Cook stopped here to collect turtle meat en route to Hawaii, as did Charles Darwin on his return voyage upon the Beagle. During World War II, it was an important naval and air station and was used extensively by the British military during the Falklands War. Climate and terrain added daily challenges for us all, from clambering over jagged rock and negotiating our way through loose volcanic clinker to scrambling up slopes of crumbling scree. Tiptoeing methodically through city turn fairs or breeding grounds one day, ascending through eucalyptus woodland in search of nests the next. A timed seabird count might fill an hour just before dusk, and the removal of a dead trapped rat could be your first job after breakfast. The diversity of our daily tasks, of which there were many, added to the richness of this incredible exploration. We were contributing, building on a tapestry of knowledge that has already changed the fate of some of these magnificent birds for the better. During our visit, we retrapped 397 previously ringed sooty terns, 2 of which were ringed in 1996 and 8 that had been tagged with geolocators. We then ringed 1,408 sooty terns, 20 of which were fitted with new geolocators. Blood and contour feathers samples were taken from a selection of birds for stable isotope analysis. The results of these tests will not only let us know the sex of these individuals, but also what their diet consisted of over the last few months. Brown noddy nests were recorded within the sooty tern fairs, as well as other sites on the island, and 20 individuals were ringed. There were 2 visits to Mars booby breeding area on the east side of the island known as Letterbox, which produced 20 retrapped birds and 80 individuals were ringed. Once we had settled into our accommodation on our first morning, we headed down to Mars Bay on the southwest corner of the island. Here we began our first task, which was to evaluate the breeding status of the sooty tern fairs or breeding area. So within the fairs there are sub-colonies, each of them at a different stage in their breeding cycle, so we concentrated our efforts in retrapping ringed adults in areas where they were easier to catch. We worked in pairs, 1 catch from 1 recorder, GPS coordinates, ring number and any other relevant data was documented, including recording and collecting any regurgitated food. The terns were caught by simply placing a net over the top of them. On average, it took about 45 seconds from trapping to release. The atmosphere within the fair was frenzied, hectic and loud. There was a continual vocalisation of many different calls, chaotic but at the same time connected, a symbiotic orchestra. Birds were flying in and out continually, some swooping, some hovering and scalding the investigating intruders who wore the tilly hats. The level of professionalism, care and overall coordination during this delicate operation was outstanding. Moving through the colony of sooty terns safely and ethically took a great deal of patience and concentration, but also had to be done efficiently. What was achieved was a highly organised and synchronised effort that yielded a considerable amount of valuable information with the minimum of disturbance. There were so many outstanding experiences over the 12 days that it's hard to highlight them all. The chaos of the sooty tern fairs, summit to seashore land bird surveys, mornings with green turtles and evenings with land crabs. There was an amazing boat trip to Boatswain Bird Island, allowing close-up views of some of the island's most wonderful residents. We explored the trails of Green Mountain, hiked the lava fields in the southwest, and counted hundreds of common Myna going to roost. Boatswain Bird Island sits off the shore of the east side of Ascension's mainland and is home to all of the island's seabirds. On day 5 of the expedition, 4 members of the AOS, including myself, joined Kaniki Andrews, an AIG conservation field worker, and Andy Richardson, the senior marine fisheries scientist, to monitor the breeding success of 2 key species, red-footed booby and white tern. We met with Andy at about 7 AM and within minutes we were puttering slowly out of the harbour, happy in the fact that calm seas and blue sky were on the agenda. Once in open water, Andy opened up the throttle on the inflatable rib and we held on tight. En route, we were joined by brown booby, black Noddy and Ascension Frigatebird, who seemed to enjoy just following the boat. We also picked up a passenger along the way, a young frigatebird. Though these pirates of the skies are completely dependent on the sea, they actually aren't waterproof. This individual was scooped up and taken to the conservation office for treatment after the trip. The giant cliffs of Boatswain Bird Island casted a shadow over us as we approached it, and then the sights and sounds penetrated our consciousness. The cliff's frenzied comings and goings included our 2 target birds. After locating all of the red-footed booby nests, we concentrated our efforts on the white-tern survey, which took much longer as they nest on every side of the island. There were many distractions while we were there, however. Yellow-billed tropic birds teased us from their nest cavities. Wave after wave of frigatebird cruised over our heads like Lancaster bombers, and below, blackfish and groupers enjoyed the sanctuary of our boat, whilst Galapagos sharks patrolled in the shadows. Another exceptional day of note started at 6:15 at Long Beach, Georgetown, where a few of us decided to look for green turtles returning to the sea. 6 individuals were recorded, 3 of which were still laying eggs. This for me was one of the highlights of this whole trip. Very intimate moment and very privileged to be able to witness it. There were also Ascension Frigatebirds circling above and predating on the turtle hatchlings. Added to that, you had land crabs and lined up almost like in a British bulldog style. These little turtles having to run the gauntlet of frigatebirds and land crabs. It was quite something to see, and though I possibly shouldn't have, I think I may have helped a few make it to the sea. Green Mountain dominates the island from its central southeastern position, and at 859 metres can be seen from all over the island. Famous for its strange flora from all around the world, it really feels very different than the lava fields below. After recording white-tern nests in the eucalyptus trees located near the old water catchment area, we divided into teams. Both Elliott's and Bishop's Loop trails were surveyed, including a quick visit to the dew pond close to the summit. Both common waxbill and common myna were recorded. Charles Darwin's visit during 1836 would have had a very different experience of this land. Barren, with just a few plants. Just 7 years later, Joseph Dalton Hooker arrived and projected a plan to vegetate the mountain in order to increase the rainfall, which would in turn produce more fresh water for the residents. We were witnessing the success of that vision, though due to this encroachment, 4 endemic plant species are now extinct and many more in serious danger. Letterbox is a high, flat, rugged plateau jutting out on the southeast side of the island. Access to this remote area is very limited, and a long hike awaits you at the end of a very bumpy and dusty track. The previous day's call-over revealed that the road was no longer usable. A torrential downpour had damaged huge sections and was no longer an option for the vehicles, so we were hiking in. All members of the AOS and 3 members of the Conservation Office staff participated on this first of 2 epic excursions. After debussing at the rendezvous point, we all prepared our gear. I adjusted my backpack, which was feeling a little heavier than normal as I was carrying a spotting scope, tripod and extra water. White terns glided in silently behind us from the adjacent cliffs, hovering over our heads, intrigued by the extraterrestrial beings. We stopped at a few vantage points which afforded us stunning views of the nesting white terns. Our agenda was slightly different than the others, in that we needed to incorporate a breeding census on the way down. The path we were following began morphing and swirling, the edges became blurry and the landscape sort of dropped away. Looking down wasn't a good idea. Fortunately, the really scary bits were intermittent, with some wider areas for you to catch your breath. Get high and stay high is a motto I can understand. And that is what we did. We followed the ridgeline trail along Power Peak, terminating at its natural summit, Louis Leap. The view from this peak was absolutely incredible. In front of us, 300 metres offshore, was the unmistakable shape of Boatswain Island. This 5-hectare island, standing tall and strong, was Ascension's seabird sanctuary. This avian haven was the last piece of safe land on which these South Atlantic specialties stood their ground. Boatswain's own Rorke's Drift. Ironically, that very battle was happening a few thousand miles to the southeast, at the very time, 1879, that the enemy was advancing on Ascension. Not Zulus though, this time it was cats and rats. We gingerly headed back along the sharp ridge line and dropped down into a steep crumbly gully, navigating with 3 points of contact at all times. At the next vantage point we dumped our packs and set up the scope for part 2 of our census of apparently occupied nests of Boatswain Island. Our 2 target species were Frigatebird and Mast Booby. Here we had good visibility of the majority of the nesting area. After meeting up with the main group on the plateau and the central area of the reclaimed Mast Booby breeding grounds, we reformed into new teams. The methods for catching Mast Boobies are similar to the terns in that they are caught by net, but that's about where the similarity ends. Logistically, it was a 3-person team for processing: 1 catcher, extractor and holder, 1 ringer and 1 recorder. Our team consisted of Roger Dickey, Andrew Bray and myself. Mast Boobies are big, strong and fast. They have a razor sharp bill that snaps, slashes and strikes with speed and can inflict serious damage. Many of us have got the scars to prove it. Ring number, GPS location, nest contents and sex were all recorded. Interestingly, the way to tell the sexes apart is to hear them call. Males wheeze and females honk. After lunch, Tony Caddick and I joined Dr. Eliza Leet, the seabird conservation scientist on Ascension, to check one of the nesting sites of Ascension Frigatebird. The historical significance of this endemic species has been well documented. Since colonisation in 1815, Ascension seabirds have been under attack. Encroachment on the breeding grounds and disturbance over so many years has obviously played a part, but more than anything, rats and primarily feral cats have devastated the breeding birds on this South Atlantic island. In 2002, the RSPB undertook a feral cat removal programme, and the island was declared cat-free in 2006. In December 2012, Andrew Bray, a long-time member of the AOS and a veteran of many Ascension Island expeditions, discovered an Ascension Frigatebird nest on Letterbox, the first mainland nest in 180 years. This breeding season, 2014-15, a total of 44 nests were discovered. At one of the nest sites we visited, there were 3 young and a few adult and juveniles perched on some rocks, an amazing sight. We were witnessing firsthand the fruits of a recovery program that has changed the fate of not only the Frigatebird but all of Ascension's seabirds. Hopefully in 8 to 10 years these young birds will be fighting for a breeding spot on their reclaimed piece of real estate, Ascension Island.